Imagine France at the end of the 18th century. Sounds like a movie scene, doesn't it? The bustling streets of Paris were filled with posters demanding change, while the countryside witnessed fields soaked with blood and tears. It was a time of extremes. On one side, the French Revolution promised a future of equality and liberty. On the other, it brought chaos, destruction, and religious persecution. Churches were shut down, priests had to flee or renounce their vocation, and families hid crucifixes as if they were forbidden treasures. Now, close your eyes for a moment and imagine a small village called Dardilly, surrounded by green fields and gentle mountains, a peaceful place where time seemed to move slowly, yet it lived under the shadow of fear. It was there, on May 8, 1786, that a boy named John Baptist Mary Vianney was born. Who would have thought that this child, born to humble farmers, would one day transform not only that forgotten village, but also the hearts of thousands around the world? John was born into a France torn apart. News from the big cities arrived like distant echoes, but the impact was real. Entire families knelt in dark barns, attending clandestine masses. The revolution had taken much from the people, but their faith, oh, they fought to keep that alive at any cost. And in the Vianney household, it was no different. John grew up, watching his mother pray fervently and his father risk his life to protect fugitive priests who served God. From a young age, John stood out. While other boys ran through the fields or went hunting, he preferred to sit in silence, speaking to God in his own childlike way. It wasn't unusual to find him kneeling in the hay, eyes fixed on an image of the Virgin Mary. His mother, a woman of unshakable faith, would say, "This boy was born with heaven in his heart." And who could have guessed how right she was? But John's childhood wasn't free from pain and challenges. He saw priests being taken away and churches desecrated. Even as a child, he felt the weight of it all in his heart. One night, during a clandestine mass in a barn, as the family gathered to watch a fugitive priest celebrate, John looked at the priest and whispered to his mother, "One day, I want to be like him." She smiled and replied, "If God wills it, my son, if God wills it." The problem was that at the time, the path to priesthood seemed impossible. Becoming a priest required years of study, and John, the son of farmers, could barely read. But he didn't give up, even as he worked the fields, tending crops and feeding the animals. He kept dreaming. At night, after a long day of work, John would grab any scrap of paper he could find and try to decipher the words, learning slowly, but with unyielding determination. When John finally got the chance to study formally, another challenge arose. Latin? Yes, Latin. It was an essential requirement for priestly studies, and John simply couldn't grasp it. He spent hours trying to memorize the words, but nothing seemed to stick. It was as if an invisible wall stood between him and his dream. But here's where John's story becomes even more remarkable. While many would have given up, he didn't. With the help of a priest named Charles Bally, who saw something special in him, John began to make progress. Each small victory felt like a giant leap. Slowly but surely, he started to believe that maybe, just maybe, God truly had a plan for him. Finally, in 1815, John was ordained a priest. Was it a moment of joy? Of course, but also one filled with great challenges. His first assignment wasn't in a grand cathedral or a respected parish. No, he was sent to Ars, a village so small and forgotten that many priests saw it as a place of punishment. Ars was known for its indifferent residents, crowded taverns, and empty church. It was the kind of place no one wanted to go. But John went. He packed his small suitcase, small, because he had almost nothing, and walked to the village. When he saw Ars for the first time, he stopped, knelt on the road, and prayed. "My God," he said, "grant me the conversion of this parish." Then he stood up, dusted himself off and continued forward. The beginning wasn't easy. The people of Ars looked at him with suspicion. Who was this thin priest, dressed in simple clothes, speaking with a countryside accent? But John didn't give up. He visited every house, spoke with every person, and above all, prayed for them. He knew he couldn't change the village on his own, but he believed God could work through him. Little by little, things began to change. People started returning to church, first out of curiosity, then out of admiration. John had a way of speaking that touched hearts. He didn't use complicated words or deliver long sermons. He spoke about God as if introducing a dear friend. And that made all the difference. But don't think John's story was all victories. He faced criticism, resistance, and even supernatural manifestations. It's said that many nights he was tormented by strange noises, furniture moving on its own, and frightening voices. To John, it was the work of the devil, furious at the impact he was having in Ars. And what did he do? He prayed even more. He would say, "The more the devil torments me, the more souls God grants me." What courage, right? And then there were the miracles. John had the gift of reading souls. Many penitents would enter the confessional and barely say a word before he already knew what they needed to confess. This frightened some people, but most felt an indescribable peace. His sermons, so simple, had the power to soften even the hardest hearts. Ars, that forgotten village, began to transform into a pilgrimage center, drawing people from all over France and even other countries. Despite all this, John never let fame go to his head. He continued to live simply, eating little, sleeping even less, and dedicating every moment to the work God had entrusted to him. Can you imagine the impact of that? A man so simple, in such a small place, changing so many lives. It's as if God were reminding us that size doesn't matter to him. What matters is the love with which we do each thing. This is just the introduction. John Baptist Mary Vianney's story has so many more twists, challenges, and of course, lessons to teach us. So why not keep listening? I promise you won't regret it. John Baptist Mary Vianney, later known as the Holy Curé of Ars, threw himself wholeheartedly into the mission God had entrusted to him. He saw Ars as a fertile field, though neglected, and believed that with time and the right care, something extraordinary could bloom. But first, he would face challenges that would test his faith and endurance to the limits. At the beginning, distrust was everywhere. The villagers, accustomed to a life without religious commitment, looked at John with skepticism. Who was this thin, humble-looking man who kept inviting them to church? But John had a strategy. He didn't just want to be Ars's priest. He wanted to be part of their lives. So he began visiting homes. Picture the scene. A frail man carrying a warm smile, knocking on doors and asking if he could come in. He would talk about daily life, listen to their struggles, and pray with them. Little by little, this strange priest started to be accepted. His genuine kindness was impossible to ignore. But the battle against indifference was only the beginning. John knew the greatest enemy wasn't material poverty or the crowded taverns, but the lack of hope. People had grown used to living without God, and convincing them that faith could transform their lives was like trying to light a fire with damp twigs. He started with the essentials: prayer. Every morning, before the sun even rose, John could be found in the church, kneeling before the altar, interceding for every person in the village. "My God," he prayed, "show me how to touch their hearts." His dedication was so profound that even when no one came to Mass, he celebrated with the same passion, trusting that God was listening. And then something extraordinary began to happen. At first, it was just a few curious individuals stepping into the church to see what made this priest special. Then, those same people began returning, bringing friends and family with them. Ars, once so spiritually cold, started to warm up. Of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing. John faced resistance, especially from those who felt threatened by the changes he was inspiring. Some mocked him, spreading rumors that he was too ignorant to be a real priest. In silence, he endured it all. "Let them talk," he would say. "My duty is to serve, not to defend myself. And let's not forget the frightening episodes that marked his life." Many nights, John was tormented by unexplainable noises. Objects would fall, doors would slam, and he felt a dark presence in his room. John believed it was the devil trying to stop him from continuing his mission. Instead of giving up, he used those terrible nights to fuel his faith. The next day, even exhausted, he was at the confessional, ready to serve whoever needed him. Ah, the confessional, what a magical place it became. John had the gift of seeing into people's hearts. Many penitents arrived full of shame or confusion, but before they could say a word, he already knew what they needed to hear. He wasn't there to judge them, but to set them free. "God has already forgiven you," he often said, as tears streamed down the faces of those who came to him. John's fame began to spread far and wide. Ars, that once forgotten village, became a destination for pilgrims. People traveled from all over to hear his sermons or confess to him. Some walked for days, enduring cold, hunger, and exhaustion just to spend a few minutes with the Holy Curé. And he, even when utterly exhausted, attended to everyone. It was common to find him in the confessional for 14, sometimes 16 hours straight, without rest. Despite his fame, John continued to live an incredibly simple life. His cassock was worn, his meals were modest, often just boiled potatoes, and his bed was so hard it seemed more like a form of penance. He would say, "Everything I have belongs to God and the souls he has entrusted to me. For myself, I only need the essentials." Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of John's life was his devotion to the Eucharist. He firmly believed that Christ's real presence in the bread and wine was the greatest gift God had given the world. He spent hours in front of the tabernacle, lost in deep adoration, as though speaking with an old friend. As the years went by, John's body began to show signs of wear. The relentless pace of his work, coupled with frequent fasting, took a heavy toll. He could barely stand at times, but he continued his duties with the same unwavering passion. On one occasion, during a Corpus Christi procession, he nearly collapsed, but insisted on giving the final blessing, saying, "God deserves our last effort." Finally, on August 4th, 1859, John sensed his time had come. He requested the last sacraments and, surrounded by friends and parishioners, surrendered his soul to God. Ars, which loved him so deeply, mourned his loss, but heaven undoubtedly gained a saint. After his death, John was canonized in 1925 and declared the patron saint of parish priests. Yet his story isn't just for priests or the religious. It's for all of us who face challenges, doubts, and limitations in our own lives. John shows us that holiness doesn't lie in grand gestures, but in faithful dedication to the small things. Here are some fascinating details about St. John Baptist Mary Vianney that shed light on his life and spirituality. Despite being one of the most well-known saints, John struggled greatly with his studies. He almost wasn't ordained due to his difficulty with Latin and theology. It was his humility and deep devotion that convinced his superiors he was truly called by God. He endured nightly spiritual attacks. John believed the devil, whom he referred to as Grappin, tormented him to try to stop him from saving souls. He would hear strange noises, furniture being dragged, and threatening voices. Yet he faced these events with serenity, often saying the attacks were proof he was on the right path. John had an extraordinary intuition in the confessional. Many said he could tell exactly what they needed to confess before they even spoke. This gift of reading souls drew thousands of penitents to Ars, seeking not just forgiveness, but also peace. He lived an incredibly austere life. His main meal consisted of boiled potatoes and sometimes a piece of bread. His room was small and simple, furnished with a hard bed and just a few basic pieces of furniture. Ars, his tiny parish, became a center of pilgrimage. During his lifetime, more than 20,000 people visited the village each year to see him. This was a staggering number for such a small and isolated place. He had a special devotion to the Virgin Mary. On numerous occasions, he credited his perseverance and pastoral success to her intercession. He kept an image of her in his room and frequently prayed the rosary. John was known for his humility. When he learned that he was to receive the Legion of Honor, France's highest distinction, he refused the award, saying he preferred all honors to be given to God. One remarkable aspect of his life was the spiritual reform of Ars. When he first arrived, he found the church nearly empty and the bars full. Over the years, he managed to transform the village, and Ars became a model of devotion and faith for the entire region. Even though he was admired during his life, John faced criticism and even envy from other priests, who thought his fame was exaggerated or that he was too simple to be a good priest. John never retaliated, accepting these criticisms with patience and entrusting everything to God. These insights highlight both the humanity and challenges of St. John Baptist Mary Vianney and demonstrate how God's grace can work through someone fully committed to their mission. The story of St. John Baptist Mary Vianney is a profound invitation to reflect on perseverance, humility, and trust in God. Delving into his life, it's hard not to ask ourselves, are we giving enough? Are we truly living to fulfill our mission, whether big or small, as he did in Ars? What touches me most about St. John Baptist Mary Vianney is his determination. He wasn't the smartest, didn't have all the talents expected of a priest, and faced criticism and ridicule throughout his life. Yet he never gave up. It makes me think about how often we back down in the face of far smaller challenges. How many times do we avoid obstacles because we feel unworthy or incapable? John shows us that God doesn't choose the most prepared. He prepares those he chooses. Another thing that inspires me is his simplicity. We live in a world that values having more than being. We chase comfort, recognition, and applause. But John lived a life of complete surrender. He ate little, slept even less, and dedicated every moment to his mission, not because he despised the good things in life, but because he had a greater goal: saving souls. It makes me wonder if we are focusing on the right things. Are we truly living for what matters? And how can we not be awed by his spiritual courage? He faced attacks from the devil himself, and instead of fleeing or despairing, he saw it as confirmation that he was on the right path. This is a profound lesson on how to approach life's battles. Often the challenges we face are opportunities to grow and strengthen our faith. John viewed suffering as part of his mission. Can we do the same? What I admire most about him, however, is his ability to touch people's hearts. He wasn't a great speaker, nor did he deliver eloquent speeches, but his life was a living testimony of God's love. His humility and dedication were so genuine that they softened even the hardest of hearts. It makes me wonder, how are we witnessing our faith in our daily lives? Are we being a light to others, as John was to us? The story of John Baptist Mary Vianney reminds me that holiness isn't reserved for those with exceptional gifts or grand achievements. It's found in the small things, done with great love. It's in being faithful to our calling, no matter how simple it may seem. Finally, John teaches me the importance of trusting God. He didn't know how he would overcome his struggles with studies or transform ours, but he believed that God knew. That trust is an invitation for us to surrender our doubts, insecurities, and limitations to God, knowing that he can do extraordinary things through us, even in our weakness. The life of St. John Baptist Mary Vianney inspires me to look into my own heart and ask, am I living for God as he did? Am I persevering through difficult moments? Am I trusting God to accomplish the impossible? The answer might often be no. But John's story shows us that it's never too late to start saying yes. Prayer to St. John Baptist Mary Vianney. O St. John Baptist Mary Vianney, humble servant of God and zealous pastor, who transformed the little village of Ars into a beacon of faith and hope, inspire us to seek holiness in our daily lives. You who faced so many difficulties and persecutions, help us persevere through life's challenges, always trusting in God's plan for us. Teach us to live simply, valuing what truly matters, love for God and for our neighbors. Intercede for us so we may find strength in our weaknesses and courage in our doubts. Grant us the gift of humility, so we may serve others with pure hearts and unwavering faith. O Holy Curé of Ars, example of love and dedication, help us to be a light in the world, bringing hope and peace to those around us. May we, like you, become instruments of divine grace, transforming our homes and communities into reflections of heaven. St. John Baptist Mary Vianney, pray for us, now and always. Amen. The story of St. John Baptist Mary Vianney is a living testament to how faith and perseverance can transform even the most forgotten places into beacons of hope. He shows us that despite our limitations, God can do great things through us if we surrender our hearts to Him. Simplicity, love for others, and trust in God defined his life, and these virtues continue to serve as an invitation to each of us. If you were inspired by the journey of the Holy Curé of Ars, subscribe to the channel Journey of the Saints, Sacred Stories. Don't forget to like this video and share his story with someone who needs a message of faith today. Now we want to hear from you. Which part of St. John Baptist Mary Vianney's life touched your heart the most? Leave your comment, and let's reflect together on how to apply these lessons in our own lives. And before you go, check out the video above, chosen especially for you. It features another moving story that will surely inspire your faith journey even more. May St. John Baptist Mary Vianney intercede for us all.